Excellent, excellent talk, Rajiv. Thank you. And again, for me, this is not only just a great honor to be here, but also a matter of pride. TRICO has been one of the largest academic influence in my career. And I learned everything I know practically in interventional cardiology from here. So the topic that I'm going to talk about today is something that is more confusing than anything, and we are now expected to perform to it. And what are the realities that we face? I don't have any relevant disclosures in this area. So as we all know, and we have learned over and over, stent expansion is the most significant predictor of post-stent coronary clinical outcomes. This is the very popular figure that you'll see from Raber et al. From a few years ago, which summarizes all the information that's out there and gives you some numbers to work with. And you look at the science behind this figure, it almost is increasing your level of confusion. A few terms are very important: the reference diameters, vessel versus lumen, and then the minimum stent area. It's important to know from Raber's recommendation two numbers: 5.5 millimeter square absolute minimum stent area, and then greater than 80% minimum stent area compared to the average reference lumen area. This is where it gets very confusing. There is at least 7 different numbers in this lineup here, and every one of them is true. Every one of them is considered a gold standard by somebody in the respectable mix of coronary imaging experts. 5.5 millimeter square area, 5 millimeter square, reference greater than 100%, 90%, 80%. You keep going, and you essentially, if you're a new beginner at this imaging platform, your head would spin saying, what do I do? So let's trace back a little bit to the history and say, where did it all start? It all started with the relative metrics. For most of you who were not around when the stent came out, stents were sized 1.1 to 1 from our balloon angioplasty experience, and the mean inflation pressure in the stress in the Stent trial was 10 atmospheres. So we used to deploy them at pretty low pressure. We used to give warfarin to everybody who got a stent, and even then we had a 5 to 6% subacute thrombosis rate. And so quickly we learned that what we were doing in the stress Stent protocols was not very attractive, not very effective. When somebody occluded the stent in the middle of the night, 70–80% of them died, and the ones who survived actually had a large scar on their left ventricle. So Colombo, in his genius pursuit of better outcomes, decided to use ultrasound to study this. And his group, in Hall's first landmark paper from Journal of Interventional Cardiology in '94, first suggested that there is a predictive value of expanding the stent all the way into the media and having a percentage expansion. And his work actually led from a 452 lesion cohort of Palma-Schartz stents, where he essentially chose randomly a number of 60% of the reference vessel area, the EEL area, as his metric. And he was essentially, he did this to assess for the compensatory dilatation of the vessel that occurs with atherosclerotic disease that we learned from Glagoff. This all led to elimination of warfarin and using a dual antiplatelet regimen to get better long-term outcomes. Again, the confusion began right there. What is reference vessel area? We are all luminologists. We don't look at EELs on our angiograms. And so this EEL concept was restricted to people who are using IVUS at that time. Later, in the same cohort, the criteria were modified, and again, the confusion began. The group noticed that if you were more aggressive with your enlargement of the stent lumen, you got better outcomes, and so they upped their percentage from 60% to 100% of the distal reference lumen area now. So you can see how confusing and convoluted this keeps getting. And so no wonder a new practitioner will get extremely confused when they start working on this. The relative metrics, which is what we are talking about right now with the percentage metrics, by now it was obvious in the bare metal stent era with the Harvard group, Caruso and David Cohen, et cetera, with Donald Bain, they were essentially convinced and showed us that bigger is better. As far as lowering in-stent restenosis with bare metal stents, the larger the lumen you left after you got done, the better your long-term outcomes were. And the concept of the vessel being at the EEL dimension was becoming more and more clear. The balloons were chosen with the balloon to vessel ratio of less than 1 of the average of proximal and distal diameters. And then, again, a lot of confusion. Vessel, lumen, major diameter, minor diameter. As a fellow at that time when I was learning, I had very little clarity on what to take home with this. Then came the the phase of studies where the landmark trials were done. The problem with most of these were they were done with bare metal stent. The RESIST trial, the music study, the cruise study, the Opticus study, et cetera, from the late 90s to the early 2000s. And they all used relative expansion metrics. Relative expansion metrics means the percentage of a reference lumen area or vessel area was used. And again, you can see there are a smattering of percentages, 80%, 90%, 100%, no consistent standardization anywhere. And they were all bare metal stents, so kind of not of use to us. We go from there to the AVID trial. Again, reference lumen concept was tested here by Russo, greater than 98%, only to find out that they were not able to achieve this particular endpoint in more than half of the patients. So the metrics we were choosing were not even achievable. And again, it was BMS data. Now we come to the DES era, and we examine the literature with stent expansion. And as you can see, the iLumen group of studies will pop up if you Google this item. iLumen 1, an observational study where they used 70% of the distal reference lumen area as their relative metric. And they were able to achieve it in about 60% of people. 40% they were not able to achieve. It was purely observational. iLumen 2 was a post-hoc analysis with the OCT arm of iLumen 1 versus IVUS arm, and some patients from ADAPT DES, so really statistically quite weak, and a relative metric was used to study the difference. iLumen 3 was a randomized controlled trial, OCT IVUS versus angiography, where they used 90% as the relative metric. And for the first time, long stents were getting pretty prevalent, so they divided the stent length into proximal and distal halves, and this was studied. iLumen 4, again, similar design and showed, but most of the endpoints here were angiographic or imaging endpoints. The relative expansion, as you can see again, still remains to be stratified into a single value. It still has a smattering of 80%, 90%, 100% of the reference lumen area. But the one thing that the younger group should take home is that we are dealing in all these metrics with the reference lumen area. Don't get carried away by the EEL areas and diameters here. The lumen is what the textbook tells you to use in this particular space of stent expansion. Let's see. The absolute metrics now. What about the people who claim that if you get a 5.5%, 5.5 millimeter square area, that your stent is fine? Where does that come from? Well, that also comes from the old BMS data and some of the original drug-eluting stents. This is a study from Sonoda, and I have to give a lot of credit to the investigators from the Far East, from Japan, Korea, and China, for doing some pioneering work in this space. But this particular graphs here are the sensitivity and specificity curves, and they show that if you look at where does the 80% metric fall, it falls for the drug-eluting stent somewhere around 5.5 millimeter square area. So they're kind of interrelated in a way. If you get a 5.5 millimeter square MSA, you're probably dealing with a pretty well expanded stent. And the C statistic, or the area under the curve of these receiver operator characteristic, are fairly supportable from a scientific, from a statistical standpoint. It's a good discriminator. Again, in this particular curve where the paclitaxel eluting stent was the studied population, a 5.7 millimeter square absolute expansion came out to be a predictor of a very good outcome. It was the discriminator of good versus bad outcome. The absolute metrics were corroborated in subsequent trials, in the doctor's trial, etc. And these are just a bunch of graphs. I don't want to bore you with that, but the bottom line message is that if you achieve an area of greater than 5.5 millimeters square, you're probably doing well. The iLumen 4 essentially showed a similar thing for the absolute metric as well. So even in the contemporary era, we have some corroboration of this. Now, what if you cannot get both? What if you can't get 5.5 and greater than 80%? Well, the truth from this one study where they compared it was that it's okay if you get either one of them. So if you get an area of more than 5.5 millimeters square, or if you get a relative expansion of 80% or more of the minimum lumen area, reference area, you're better off than getting neither one of them. Makes some intuitive sense, but this is some proof for that. This is a new index that Dr. Akasaka actually was one of the contributors to this, and probably the concept was his, was a volumetric expansion index which takes into consideration the tapering of the vessels. So when the vessel tapers because of side branches, etc., you can use this minimum expansion index, which is calculated by automation by the OCT platform, and you can essentially see in his data set, this was the only metric that predicted adverse events that were related to the device, the stent. How about the latest concept from a post hoc analysis by Fujimura from the ADAPT DES trial? The concept of how do you deal with a negatively remodeled artery from an MSA standpoint? And that's where we found that if you have an MSA to the vessel area at MSA of greater than 40%, that actually works out to be a fairly reasonable strategy. I don't want to take too much time, but I'll show you this one figure here, which is very impressive. Both of these patients have a stent area of 6+ millimeters square. The first patient has a 92% expansion, and the second patient has an 85% expansion. Difference in there. But you can see that the MSA divided by the vessel area at MSA is very different. One is 34%, one is 67%. The outcomes are better if your MSA to vessel area is greater than 40%. So again, coming back to this diagram, stent expansion is the most important procedural metric predicting stent outcomes. The definition of optimal stent expansion are many. Prospective, comparative, clinical outcomes studies of these metrics are practically non-existent. We have not studied the clinical outcomes. We have only studied imaging, etc. Stent expansion is affected by lesion character and vessel geometry, remodeling, etc. And so every case is different. Pre-PCI imaging maximizes your chances of meeting one of these criteria post-PCI. It's important to identify remodeling, especially negative remodeling, because if you chase those patients to expand your stent, you will end up with a bad outcome in the lab. Using OCT, you can use more volumetric metrics like MEI. And when you have a negatively remodeled vessel, use the Fujimura metric, I call that, which is MSA divided by vessel area at MSA of greater than 40%. And if you're dealing with the generic vessel size, 2.5 to 3.5 millimeters, an MSA of 5.5 or larger millimeter square is well indicative of good stent expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, wonderful talk. So this MEI is automated in the new OCT machines, or it's something that we need to calculate, Dr.?
It is automated from what I understand. Dr. Akasaka can probably give more insight into that. He has, I think, pioneered that concept.
Yeah. By software, you can easily identify the MEI, right? So, but basically, we try to measure we have to divide before the big branch and after big branch, and try to divide the measure each portion, right?
Yep. MEI is good for branching vessels like LAD, etc. negative remodel vessels, the MSA divided by vessel area at MSA is useful. So I think there's a heterogeneous mix that is out there for us, and we use what fits well with that.
I think the absolute numbers are sometimes cannot be generalizable, because for somebody like African American blacks who have body surface area much higher, vessel diameter of 5 or 6, versus short Indians who don't have a vessel area vessel diameter of that much, then numbers in absolute terms doesn't probably, but of course the proof of pudding lies in eating, so we have the cutoffs of 5.5 or 5, as you say.
If your vessel is between 2.5 and 3.5, 5.5 is matching with the other ones.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
Sir,
very much.
I have a question. Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So why there is no stent overexpansion criteria on imaging? On imaging.
Overexpansion criteria.
Why I want to ask this question is, majority of the time we do in post stent deployment imaging, and even after post dilatation, we see an area which can be further expanded. And as we know that MSA is the single most important factor for predicting the TLR and TVF. So why not there is a stent overexpansion criteria, so that we can choose accordingly the balloon, and if that criteria was breached, then we stop dilating that segment.
So if you cross 100%, you perforate. So I think that's one reason. But still, if you want to answer that,
Why there's no criteria?
Previously, there are data showing the bigger is better, right? Bigger is better. But recently, from data from Korean friends, if you dilate bigger, there are some risk of the event. Therefore, try to finish the around 100%, not over dilate. Over dilate may make some event.
medial hematomas, microaneurysms, late aneurysms are some of the other things that actually is a problem. That's why you don't want to overdo it. Of course, there are no cutoffs. Your question is valid. We don't know at what value you stop, but I think that's why we have a value of 80 and 90%, as was shown in this presentation. I think that.
Yeah, you stick to the initial IVAS or OCT, because vessel is elastic structure. When you expand more, it can give more. So always we have to define that how much is the vessel size.
Okay. Because that sounds too contradictory. One, on the other hand, we say larger the MSA, lesser the TLR. And on the other hand, we say stick to 100%. But we don't know the exact cutoff where we should stick.
Yeah, always follow the senior strategy, as sir has taught, that always keep your sense also. Angiography, IVAS, and don't rely only on one criteria.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have to especially be careful of negative remodeling, because you will have perforations, which a lot of famous operators who used imaging earlier had very high rates of perforations. And deep medial injury is also a very big issue to be addressed, and it actually increases restenosis.
Yeah, we have seen nowadays with IVAS and OCT era more perforations, because sometimes we don't even have a common sense.
Because they chase the numbers, and then that sometimes you actually with a 1 calcifix per and abnormal expansion, and you give way on the other end.
Yeah, we always recommend MLD max. Before PCI, you have to check the morphology and region length and diameter, right? But if there are eccentric calcium, and if you follow more than 90% or nearly 100% dilatation, there are some risk, because or some risk of perforation, because always a vessel expand the opposite side of the calcium, right? So it depends on the condition. They are very difficult to identify one fixed indicator, right, to predict the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move